Canada has just announced a $1.4 billion defense shift, and it targets the United States at its most sensitive point. For the first time, Canada is moving to manufacture its own weapons and ammunition at scale, breaking a decades-long reliance on the United States for critical defense supplies. This decision does not exist in a vacuum. It follows months of tariffs, pressure, and escalating rhetoric from the administration of Donald Trump, actions that fundamentally altered how Canada views its closest ally. But instead of backing down, Mark Carney moved in the opposite direction. He is not merely reducing dependence, he is replacing it. And the consequences of that choice will reach far beyond Canada's borders, reshaping global defense markets, trade relationships, and the balance of influence itself. To understand why this moment matters, you have to look at where it began. For decades, Canada and the United States operated on a simple assumption: economic partnership, security cooperation, and mutual trust. That foundation began to fracture under Trump. Tariffs were imposed, long-standing trade agreements were threatened, and at one point, even Canada's sovereignty entered the conversation. That was the breaking point. Once that line is crossed, everything changes. Canada had a choice: continue relying on an unpredictable...
So, Rafi, tell us a little bit more about what the defense minister was unveiling today.
Essentially money for ammunition producing capability in Canada, Arthi. So he announced $1.4 billion. A lot of that, some $306 million, will go toward IMT Precision, the munitions company where he was speaking. And the idea there is to build a brand new facility in London, Ontario, that would specialize in producing 155 millimeter artillery shells. So the kinds of shells that go into howitzer type artillery cannons.
Mark Carney chose a different path. Rather than reacting emotionally to pressure, he began restructuring Canada's position from the ground up. The first move was economic. Carney accelerated efforts to diversify Canada's trade relationships, reducing reliance on the United States as the dominant partner. This meant deepening ties with Europe, expanding engagement across Asian markets, and signaling clearly that Canada was no longer operating within a single economic orbit. This was not about cutting ties with the United States. It was about reducing vulnerability. Dependence limits leverage, and limited leverage weakens any negotiating position. By expanding Canada's economic pathways, Carney introduced flexibility into the system. Canada could now absorb pressure without immediately conceding to it. But economic independence alone is insufficient if security dependence remains intact. For decades, Canada's defense posture has been tightly linked to the United States, not only through alliances like NATO, but through shared supply chains, procurement systems, and access to critical military equipment. That framework worked when the relationship was predictable. Once unpredictability entered the equation, that dependence became a liability. This is where Carney's second step emerged. He began shifting Canada toward greater defense self-reliance, not by abandoning alliances, but by strengthening Canada's ability to operate within them on its own terms. Today's announcement is not a reaction. It is the execution of a strategy set in motion the moment the old assumptions collapse. The Canadian government has now committed $1.4 billion to building domestic ammunition production capacity. This is not symbolic spending. It is targeted, strategic, and urgent. A significant portion of the funding is dedicated to constructing new facilities capable of producing 155 millimeters artillery shells, the backbone of modern high-intensity warfare. At the same time, existing defense manufacturing capacity is being expanded. New contracts are being awarded. Production lines are scaling up nationwide. This shift is about control over supply, control over capability, and control over national security decisions. The geopolitical implications are immediate. For years, the United States has been a primary supplier of military equipment and ammunition to its allies, including Canada. That relationship created leverage because dependence creates influence. That leverage is now shrinking. When Canada produces its own ammunition, it stops.
We will be achieving our 2% spend by March 31st. Stay tuned. And this is not a last-minute spending spree. This is the culmination of years of work in some cases, certainly the last year, in laying track to set up the announcements to be able to actually now execute on a plan. We have a plan. And the plan in this case is to make absolutely sure that Canada and our Canadian Armed Forces have the ammunition that they need. Any surplus ammunition can then be shared with our NATO allies.
The impact extends even further. This initiative is not limited to domestic demand. Canada is building capacity that can exceed its own needs, creating surplus production, and surplus means exports. Canadian defense manufacturers are already positioning themselves to supply allies worldwide. Canada is no longer just a buyer in the global defense market. It is becoming a supplier, a competitor, and an alternative. This transformation is unfolding at a critical moment. Global security conditions are shifting rapidly. Conflicts are intensifying. Supply chains are growing fragile. Governments are waking up to the reality that dependence is a strategic risk. Canadian officials have been clear. The world is entering a period where old assumptions about stability no longer apply. In this environment, nations that control their own defense capabilities gain leverage. Those that do not face exposure step back, and the pattern is unmistakable. This is not a single decision, it is a doctrine. Diversify trade, reduce dependence, build domestic capacity, strengthen alliances on Canada's terms, ensure that external pressure can never again dictate national decisions. This is what strategic independence looks like.
This is a moment of very, very profound change. It cannot be understated. A moment where the world is shifting in ways that are faster, more complex, more uncertain than we've seen in decades. The global security environment we once relied on is no longer fixed. It's being reshaped in real time. As the Prime Minister likes to say, we're witnessing a true rupture, a break from the assumptions and the stability that define the past. Assumptions like our geography is going to protect us, because it won't. At the same time, new and emerging technologies across both traditional and non-traditional domains are transforming the nature of threats and how they evolve. This is not a return to the old world. It's something fundamentally different. And in the face of that reality, we'd better be very clear-eyed and resolute about it.